Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts, which is reverse dieting. So I know that we have done a episode on this, but it was right when we first started. So we're going to hopefully make it not so long this time.
Yeah, well, also that, and we've got 2 more years of experience under our belts at this point with having clients reverse diet and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of people who start listening to the podcast now, I mean, they're just not going to get all the way back to episode 5, which is literally what it was. So figured we'd do a redo, make it more concise, and just really give you guys the need to knows and the how-tos of reverse dieting so that if it's something that you need to do, you can take action and actually successfully accomplish it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in.
Yeah. I think the first thing I wanted to preface with is none of this will make any sense if you don't know how to track macros, what tracking macros is, and how to do that successfully, because this is all going to be in the context of doing that and doing that successfully in a fat loss phase. So if you've tracked macros before, this episode's definitely for you. And if it's not, go to episode number 13 called Macros 101 and start to brush up your macro knowledge there. And then episode, I think 16 is everything you need to know about fat loss. So then you can know what the heck we're talking about after you've listened to those.
And I guess you could try to diet and you could try to reverse diet without tracking macros, but it's really difficult. You're just not going to be as accurate, and unless you have a really good understanding of food and nutrition, then it's going to be really hard. And there is a good possibility that you could gain a lot of weight and say, you know what, reverse dieting just didn't work for me. And that might be just because you aren't able to accurately manipulate the data. So that would be a huge reason that I would say, well, try tracking macros and reverse dieting at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely kind of a learning curve here, but we are going to operate under the assumption that you have listened to those episodes or you've had experience with this for the rest of this episode, just to keep things simple and concise. So reverse dieting, what is it? It is essentially the process of taking your calories from their very lowest, whether you are either under eating or you're at the end of a diet, up to your projected maintenance calories. And you'll figure out what your true maintenance calories are through the process of reverse dieting and finishing up a reverse diet. So that's literally what it is calories from deep deficit, 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories, or whatever the lowest you got to and your cut was, up to what your maintenance should be.
Yeah. And I will say though that your maintenance calories can change, and they will change. So let's say you worked with a coach 2-3 years ago and they gave you what were considered your maintenance calories. That doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be 3 years from now. So a lot of things can change. And so I think that that's sometimes a misconception too. If you reverse diet, you think that you kind of have this set point, but that can change over time. And what you feel like, and this, I guess we'll probably dive into some examples later on, but I have had clients who are maintaining their weight at a, maybe 1,500-1,600 calories. And then we actually reverse diet and they're able to lose weight on higher calories. And so their maintenance calories change. So there's a lot of I don't know, a lot of different things that can change. And I guess maintenance calories kind of can change as well.
Yeah, and just a little bit on why that is because first of all, lifestyle, you might have worked with a coach in years past and maybe you were in college and you had maintenance calories, cutting calories, all those things. And you might be trying to plug and play with those numbers 5 years down the road and being like, why the heck is none of this working? Well, maybe you got married and had kids. Maybe you started a full-time career at a desk job. Maybe you're not on your feet most of the day. Maybe you have just a completely different body and metabolism at this point in your life from all of life's changes. So that can affect what your metabolism, the state of your metabolism is, as well as what you've been doing with your diet. Have you been overeating? Have you been undereating? Your metabolism is going to be different because it adapts to what you've been doing. So, yeah, all of that.
Yeah. So I think that there's a big misconception when it comes to reverse dieting, because a lot of people think that it means that you are automatically going to gain weight. They think of it as like a bulk. And a lot of women, and I would say that this is probably the biggest issue that we run into with clients, and I'm putting words into your mouth. I'm going to assume it's the same for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where they come to us and their goal is weight loss or their goal is fat loss. And we're like, cool, let's bump your calories up. And they're like, what? Because they're like, no, I want to diet. Like, I want to lose weight. And you're like, yeah, I heard you. Let's bump your food up. And, trying to talk to them, no matter, I feel like how much you try to give them information on reverse dieting, how it can help, give them examples, it still goes against everything that they've been taught about how to lose weight, which is calories in, calories out. So a lot of women are very, very skeptical of how reverse diet can help and benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I just I did like a private seminar yesterday for some of our clients, and I went into basically all the reasons why you could potentially lose weight on a reverse diet, or why like restricting heavily doesn't always work, and like the metabolic nitty gritty of it. I think we'll save that for another episode. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, actually, our episode on metabolic adaptation is really good to understand a lot of those details. But it just, the calories in versus calories out is true, but it's just so freaking complex beyond what we think it is. We think calories in is what we put into MyFitnessPal, and that's it. We think calories out is the calories we burn when we exercise and what our Apple Watch tells us. And that is just such a umbrella statement over all of these details and nuances of all the different ways calories in can be different based on your genetics, your gut microbiome, the types of foods that you're eating, whether they're packaged or unprocessed. And calories out can change based on non-exercise activity, exercise activity, the types of foods that you're eating, and genetics and your metabolism and your overall stats. And so it's not just to put this into a macro calculator formula and figure out what your calories are. Like, it is so complex. And so I think when people are faced with, well, I've been eating 1,200 calories a day, the only way I can lose weight is by eating 1,000. Actually, the best thing you could probably do is reverse diet, especially if you've been chronically dieting for a while. A lot of times we see really, really positive responses to this increase in calories, because the misconception is, oh, reverse diet equals reversing my progress, reversing all of my fat loss, reversing all the things that I've done well. No, it's just reversing your calories. Your progress will stay the same or improve. But it's, again, the lowest part of your deficit to maintenance, meaning that every single step in a reverse diet is still a freaking deficit. Like, every time you raise calories from the lowest point to maintenance, at no point in this are you touching a calorie surplus. So yes, people will lose weight during a reverse diet because you're literally taking steps up in a deficit.
Yeah. And I will say though, I guess there's another misconception that if you reverse diet and you gain weight, that you were doing something wrong. And that if you reverse diet, you always lose weight, because that is not the case.
Yeah.
And there are some women who will gain, half pound to a pound every single week going into a reverse diet, or maybe not every single week, but that is definitely something that can happen. So I don't want you to think that if you start reversing your calories that you're doing something wrong. But if you have a coach that can walk you through the process, that's really, really helpful, because they can look at all the other biofeedback. They can see what may be causing the weight gain. Is it the increase in food? Is it something else that's going on? And they can help you stay the course, because that is one of the most difficult aspects of reverse dieting, is because, the clients who maybe are skeptical and they're like, okay, maybe I'll try to increase my food for a little bit. And after a couple of weeks, they'll be like, okay, can we diet now? And it is really, really hard as a coach to be like, no, we're not done. Like we need to increase. So Marissa hit the nail on the head with like, when is the time to reverse diet? And so if you are someone who's been a chronic dieter, if you're someone who are eating like less than 1,200 calories, and you come to a coach and you want to lose weight, and or just right now, if you want to lose weight yourself, you could drop your food down lower. You could increase your cardio or your output. Maybe you lose another pound or so. But you're just going to plateau again because you're just at kind of like a sticking point and there's just really nowhere to go. So reverse dieting is going to be the absolute best thing that you can do in that context because you're giving your body a break. Like when you're chronically dieting, that you're putting your body in such a big stressful state. And so reversing that, taking some of that pressure off your body, giving yourself time to heal and actually build, is going to be so much beneficial and it's going to pay off in the long run. So I always kind of talk to clients, like, if you want to come to me and lose a couple pounds, we can do that. But if you want to spend a little bit more time together, maybe lose 5, 10, 15 pounds over a longer course, like what would you rather have? And usually they're like, well, like 10 to 15 pounds. We're like, cool. So this is part of the reason why we got to increase your food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other time it's right to reverse diet is if maybe you're listening to this and you didn't listen to us at the beginning, you don't know what a macro is, but you still wanted to listen, that's okay. This is for you. If you are the woman who has a coffee in the morning, has a salad or a smoothie for lunch, and then has a protein and a vegetable for dinner, and that's all you eat, and you find yourself binging on the weekends, it is also the time to reverse diet for you because guess what? What I just described, probably 800, 900 calories per day. And that's the reason that you're going overboard on the weekends because you're not eating enough. And if we just increase your daily intake, you could actually be consistent, include the foods that you love every day of the week, and not have those weekend binge fests. And
Yeah.
reverse dieting is a really great solution for that to help you understand what is a true just day of eating need to look like for me to either maintain or even see successful fat loss without restricting like crazy. And sometimes those types of women that I described don't feel like they're restricting, but they still fall into this toxic cycle of overeating and undereating. So if that's a frustrating cycle for you, continue listening.
Yeah. And I will also say that I have clients that come to me and they don't feel like they're not eating enough because they get full very quickly. And when they plug everything into my fitness pal, they're really only eating like 1,000 calories. And they're like, I don't feel like I'm restricting myself. It's hard for me to eat, but in order to build muscle, I know I need to eat more. And so that would be a time to reverse diet as well. And we can go into, if we have time, like the nuances of what to do if you don't have an appetite in order to increase your food. But we can kind of go into, I guess right now, like how do I reverse diet? Okay, I know I need to do it, but now what?
Yeah. And also, too, a big part of reverse dieting is you gain a lot of your appetite cues back. A lot of times you're not hungry because you're under eating. And so just flip the script there. So, but we'll get into that. So, how basically, we've kind of alluded to this, but the main thing you're going to do is you're going to increase your food gradually over time, usually by a couple hundred calories at a time, usually changing your carbs and your fats, not necessarily a protein, because that should already be in a decent spot. And so typically how I like to do this is the first calorie jump is always the largest because we just need to get out of like a severe deficit if we're at the very, very lowest, right? So say if someone's eating 1,200 calories per day at the end of their diet, our first jump might be 200, 300 calories, 14, 1,500 calories, and all of that adding to carbs and fat. So it might be, I don't know the math off the top of my head, but it might be like 30 grams of carbs and like 10, 15 grams of fat to their day every day, to start their reverse diet. And it's like, oh my God, that's scary, but also awesome because I get to eat all these fun, awesome foods that I didn't get to have before. But also, oh my God, it's so much more food. Am I going to gain weight? No, we already just debunked that. But after that, I tend to go with smaller increases based on the progress that we're seeing, as well as whether or not we're reducing any sort of cardio, if that was a part of the protocol for fat loss as well. Because with
Yeah.
fat loss phase, you're typically reducing calories and adding cardio to create that deficit. So you have to dial both of those things back slowly and strategically over time.
And Marissa, like, just said the exact same thing I was thinking. It's like when you have a client who's eating 1,200 calories and all of a sudden someone gives you permission to eat 1,400, 1,500 calories, say, hey, eat more fat, eat more carbs. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And like your coach is like, yeah, do it. And there's something so crazy that it's just like a psychological switch where someone is now allowing you to do that. It just gives, and you now feel like you have permission. It changes a lot. You don't feel that guilt anymore, or maybe it's less guilt. Maybe it doesn't eliminate it altogether. But sometimes it makes it easier to stick with the idea of like, okay, I'm reversing. I have someone in my corner. I have a coach. Like, obviously my coach doesn't want me to like lose all my progress. So like, they're going to help me do this the right way. And I have seen so many of my clients who they and she's a hyper responder, so I will point that out. But she came to me eating a good amount, maybe around 200 grams of carbs, but we were able to reverse her all the way up to like 340 or 350 carbs. And she was like, never in my life did I imagine I could eat this much food and still look the way I do. And I'm like, yeah, like you probably would have never known that because you never would have tried to go in the opposite direction to reach your goals. And so when we did diet, she was dieting like a little bit under where we started her and had made huge progress. And so there's something about having permission and someone walking you through the process that just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, and that's why most of the time, the first time women in particular, will reverse diet is always with a coach rather than on their own, because
Yes.
it's fear that holds us back. Like, what if I gain weight? Well, I mean, in all honesty, the worst possible case scenario is if you try it and it doesn't work and you gain weight, you can always go back to what you were doing and just stay stagnant. Like, there's literally no downside. But a lot of times it's just that fear holds us back, and like making, say, an investment in a coach pulls you through to say, well, they have my best interest in mind, so I'm just going to trust them and do what they say. And then you get that permission and you're like, holy crap, I am allowed to eat these things. That's amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Or the first sight of the scale creeping up and you automatically go, I want to quit. This is not working. Having a coach saying, hey, no, like, let's stick it out another week or two. Let's see what happens. And you're like, oh, I dropped weight. And you're like, yeah. So just sometimes like having someone to be able to say, hey, like, hey, this is why I think the scale is up, or like, let's look at some other factors. It makes a really big difference because like Marissa was saying, normally you don't try to do it on your own. And even if you did, you probably wouldn't stick it out as long as you should.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so yeah, gradual increases in food, gradual reductions in cardio. Same thing with the cardio, or like say step count if you're doing that. I would say the first reduction should be the greatest. So again, you raise your calories a little bit quicker off the bat. You're also going to reduce cardio off the bat. So if you're doing a 30-minute session every single day, maybe you cut that down to 3 or 4 times per week right off the bat. And then from there, maybe you're shaving off 5 minutes per session at a time, or one session at a time instead, just so it doesn't feel so all or nothing, because you can kind of see the, I guess, lack of a parallel between this and most people who just diet on their own. Is they will do a diet and then they'll go really hard, and as soon as they're done, they stop doing all of it. Right. So this is basically just methodically, slowly bringing things back to a place that is sustainable. And we'll talk about what the end point really needs to look like based on, your individual needs. But yeah, basically a larger decrease in cardio up front, and then slow shaving off of time or sessions as you go.
Yeah. So you do that week to week, and there are possibilities that your coach or you yourself, you might say, hey, I think I just want to hold steady this week. So I'm not going to make any changes. I'm just going to hold course. And maybe the scale did jump up, maybe half a pound or something. And so you just want to hold steady and then see what happens. And maybe you hold steady, maybe you drop again, whatever it might be. Maybe you gain weight and you might hold steady again. But what we do to kind of monitor progress, there are a lot of things that we look for. And so this can be really tricky because, like we mentioned earlier, there are times when clients do gain weight. And that doesn't necessarily mean that something is going wrong, that you're doing something bad. It might mean that you are gaining muscle. And so that is why progress pictures are so incredibly important, because we've had multiple clients who will say, I'm gaining weight, this isn't working. And we'll take their starting pictures and we'll put their current pictures and put them next to each other and be like, hey, like, what would you rather look like? And they're like, oh my gosh. They're like, now. And you're like, yeah, even though you weigh more, you look way better because your body composition is changing. Like you're gaining muscle, like you're looking better, your inches are down. So even though the scale is increasing, like your body composition is changing and making a lot of progress. So that is why it's again, having a coach is really, really important, because it's really hard to notice those day-to-day changes in the mirror because you kind of feel like you look the same. But having a coach who can look at things and be like, hey, look, no, like you're leaner here, you're tighter overall, like your midsection is shrinking, like you're taking your measurements. So that is another way that we monitor progress. And then also, like, how are your workouts? Like, how are you feeling in the gym? Like, do you feel like you're getting better pumps? Do you feel stronger? Are you hitting PRs? That's another sign that you're progressing, even if you don't see any changes on the scale. Like, how is your energy? How is your mood? How are you feeling day to day? How is your digestion? Like, there are just so many things that we can look at for progress that are just outside of the scale.
Yeah. So when you're monitoring your progress for reverse diet, knowing when to make those changes, when to make the next jump is really difficult because you have all of those things that you need to monitor, biofeedback measures that are qualitative, not necessarily quantitative, but then you also need all of the data of, one, how adherent were you to the current plan? And then two, what did your weight do? What is your body doing? And typically, like, general rules of thumb, if you are doing a reverse diet, you make a jump and you lose weight right off the bat for the whole week, like and this is, you're weighing yourself every day and the average weight went down, not just like random weigh-ins here and there.
Mhm.
But if you lose weight for the week, then you are always warranted a larger reduction in cardio or a larger increase in food, and you can either do one or the other or some of both. But I would say, like, you can, depending on how much weight you lose, right? Like if you drop 3 pounds your first week of reverse dieting, you could probably add another 250 calories to your day. Like, plain and simple, you can make a bigger jump like that. Versus if you lose half a pound, maybe you add 150 calories to your day, or 100, or whatever it is. But definitely warrant bigger changes in adding food, reducing cardio, the more you lose, if that's the case. If your weight stays the same, this is when it is a little bit trickier, because how are you feeling? Is your digestion good, or are you starting to feel bloated, right? And a lot of times when you increase your food, if you're not doing it properly, meaning you're eating all the same meals for breakfast, lunch, and snacks, and then eating the remainder of your calories at night, waking up bloated, with the increases, that could be troublesome. So, make sure that when you are increasing your food, you're increasing proportionally all of your meals across the day, your serving sizes, to match that. But if you are feeling good and your weight is staying the same, you can absolutely increase maybe 10, 15 grams of carbs, 5, 10 grams of fat, or, shave a cardio session down. There's nothing wrong with continuing to increase if your weight is holding steady week to week. And then if your weight goes up, then usually it's like hey, let's hold steady for a week, see what happens, because it might just level out after a week, an extra week or so. But if it doesn't, and it goes up and then it holds steady, then we can make the increase after it holds steady for an extra week. So that will take patience, and it takes monitoring not only weight, but body circumferences, photos, and all the qualitative measures that Christina mentioned, and your training as well. So that's pretty much how I would suggest to monitor that progress over time. And you probably want to build out some kind of an Excel sheet for it.
Yeah. So, of course, Marissa and I do everything the exact same. So I have no changes to that. That's the exact same approach that I use with our clients. And so, like I mentioned too, like if we did see a spike on the scale or something like that, or an increase, it's kind of like, well, let's look at other factors. Like, are you on your cycle? Like, are there some other things that are at play? So it may not just be the increase in food and the decrease in activity. So just something to consider.
Yeah.
Colton is awake. I gotta go grab him.
Okay. I'm going to just start talking about expectations.
Okay, cool.
So now you know how to do it, you know what it is. Now we want to kind of touch on expectations around reverse dieting, because you should have specific expectations in place to know that, you know, things are going well and, you know, you're not crazy and all of the above. So the first thing is we talk about weight gain. One thing I want to make very clear is when you first start a reverse diet, let's say you're on a very low carb diet and you have been successful with it, you've lost a lot of weight. Guess what happens when you increase your carbs? And this is why people who go on keto freak out when they start regaining the weight after, is because when you deplete your body of carbs, you're depleting your muscles of a fuel source called glycogen. This is the stored form of carbohydrate that is stored in the muscle. And this is great for you and your training, because when you have stored glycogen, even if you don't necessarily have carbs, say, in your bloodstream going to your muscles, the glycogen in your muscles will allow you to get a good workout and push through heavy and hard workouts and get a pump and all of those things. So when you eat a really low carb diet for a long period of time, you're basically depleting your body and your muscles of glycogen. Here's the thing about glycogen. Glycogen has weight, and for every gram of glycogen stored in the muscle, it also pulls in 3 grams of water with it. So you have 4 total grams of a substance in your muscles that is being stored, and that is weight. And so when you increase your carbohydrate intake right off the bat in a reverse diet, the first thing a lot of people will see is a spike on the scale the next day or 2 or week even, before things start to level out, because you've replenished your muscles glycogen and therefore water storage in the muscle. And you're going to weigh more because your whole body has muscles on it and your whole body is going to store glycogen in it. And that's not fat, but it's weight that might show up on the scale. So that is an expectation that when you get to a place in your reverse diet where you're no longer depleted and you're not in such a heavy deficit that your muscles can't store anything, once your muscles start to store some glycogen, you're gonna pack on some weight on the scale, maybe a pound or two, and it's not body fat. And you'll notice this when your workouts really start skyrocketing. You really start feeling good in the gym, getting amazing pumps. That's when you're gonna start to notice what that is and what that feels like. So that would be a big expectation I would set in a reverse diet. Just expect to not lose weight, because that is one part of it. And you may or may not continue to lose weight in a reverse diet. That's cool. But if you do, great. It's a bonus. It's awesome. And the reasons for that is because you might have a little more energy. You might give a little more output in your day, and you might, your metabolism might upregulate in some areas. That's awesome. And it's great that your body's responding that way. But don't make it an expectation that you're going to lose weight when you reverse diet, because maintaining through a reverse diet is a great result. And even just gaining 1-2 pounds from your lowest in your cut, great result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say too, because Marissa and I are competitors, we have gone through extreme dieting phases. And when we reverse diet, we typically put on quite a bit of body weight. So I would say anywhere from 10, 15, over the course of the reverse, maybe even 20 pounds. But it's because of the amount of weight loss that we lost for contest prep. So that's another expectation to have, is like, how intense was your last dieting phase? And so like how much weight you might regain and how much of that is like necessary to gain.
That's a great point. And I'll give a tactical example because it's pretty much right on par. I competed last at 124 pounds or so at my height of 5'6", which is crazy. And I right now at like the almost end of my diet right now, which is a lifestyle diet and a weight that I feel I could actually maintain, I'm at 145. So 20 pounds up from the lowest in my contest prep. up to a really healthy, lean physique, like you have no idea like where all that weight comes from, but it comes from somewhere, and it's like that is necessary weight. And so just like a tactical example, like a reverse diet from a contest prep, very different than a reverse diet
Yes.
from a lifestyle cut. Cause I expect from this diet, this reverse diet, to probably reverse diet up a pound or two and then maintain around 145 to 147 for a while. And then, slowly let some weight come back on over the winter, most likely, because that's always what happens. And
Hmm.
then kind of just fluctuate in that range. But that's kind of my expectations around it. Um, and I also wanted to list out an expectation, I guess, when you're adding food back in, I guess maybe not an expectation, but like something to be mindful of is, yes, you will be able to fit in foods that you haven't had in a while, and it's important to work those in, and it's important to be inclusive and have that dessert every day and whatever you want to do. But I think it's also important to note that a mistake that people can make in a reverse diet is, with those extra calories, basically only adding in processed or packaged foods, because those foods have a really, really high error percentage in the label compared to what's actually in the food. And so if you are trying to reverse diet properly, try to increase, nutrient dense food consumption, not only for the sake of accuracy, but for the sake of energy, like energy in your day and nutrients in your body that you haven't been getting because you've been dieting. Fun fact, a fat loss diet is most likely deficient in a number of nutrients because you just can't get enough calories in to get all those nutrients. So don't just use it as an excuse to add cookies to the end of your day, but add a fruit and vegetable here and there. Like add a bigger serving of a whole grain, add a little bit more of a iron dense lean protein. Like it's really going to be beneficial for your health as well as your metabolism.
Yeah, and I will see this too. A lot of times, some clients will say, "Oh, now I can have alcohol because I'm no longer in a dieting
Yeah.
phase." And so
Use all my
it's,
carbs and fats for
yeah,
alcohol.
yeah. And so, like, and that's also the same thing that Marissa was talking about, is we want to make sure that what we're adding back in is also going to help us from a nutrient standpoint and actually benefit us in some way. So again, that's not to say that you can't add alcohol in, but that shouldn't be where like all of our calories come from. But that's something that I definitely see with clients who like they'll start to have a glass of wine with dinner, which is, again, it's fine, but it shouldn't be where the majority of your extra food comes from. And like Marissa had mentioned earlier in the podcast, where it's not just calories in, calories out. There's a lot that goes into it. And, I think that when IIFYM, or like if it fits your macros, flexible dieting kind of came out back in like, was it 2014, 15?
Something like that.
It was kind of like a carb is a carb. And I think that I used to think that back then I used to say like, oh yeah, Pop-Tart is the same thing as eating like potatoes, like a carb is a carb. But that is not how your body responds. So if you have someone who were to just eat Pop-Tarts and someone who were to just eat more like complex carb sources, you would see probably a little bit of a difference in their physique and how they're feeling. But again, that's not to say that you can't fit some fun things in, but it also will play into your reverse dieting, like how your body will respond to the foods that you're eating.
Yeah. Yeah. And your body likes nutrient dense whole foods. So don't deprive it of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great point. And I think the last thing we wanted to touch on was just how to know when you're done reverse dieting. And pretty much you can know this from, roughly, how big of a deficit did you think you were in when you were dieting? 800 calorie deficit. Okay. Then if you raise your calories by 800, you'll probably be around maintenance. But the metabolism is adaptive and super complex. And so it may not be the case there, which is fun because you might be eating more calories at maintenance. And basically, easy definition is your weight staying stable for like 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time at your current level of calories. But as we talked about, you can probably still get away with increasing food for a lot of people even if your weight is just stable. So how do you know if you're done if you can just keep increasing your food and your weight is still stable? Well, your preference comes into this too. Like, do you enjoy eating 3,000 calories a day? No? Okay, great. You can maintain on a little less and just eat what fits your lifestyle. Like maybe it's not 3,000, but it's 2,500, has you feeling your best, most energetic, not overly stuffed. Your digestion is good, your energy is good, and you don't feel like you're constantly focused on trying to get the next meal in, right? So for those hyper responders that they could just add food, add food, add food, and they're very active, they have very strong metabolisms. You don't have to max your metabolism out. It is optimal for like competing purposes and a reverse diet, but as a lifestyle, like just get to a place where you're eating a good amount of calories. I'll say for most women, if they're very petite, maybe that's 1,700 calories or something at the lowest, but usually it's anywhere between like 1,800, 2,200 calories for most women that are, in America, have a career that they probably sit sometimes at. And it usually adjusts around that range depending on how much they exercise, how much they move. But like if it's somewhere in the realm of that and you are not focused on food all the time, you're not constantly like obsessed with MyFitnessPal, and you feel satiated at the end of the day and you don't have a crap ton of cravings all the time, you are probably in a pretty good spot.
Yeah. And I will say, like, once you get to this spot, like you can hang out there for a while. And like Marissa said, it really depends on you as a client. And it's funny because I think that you and I just recently posted something similar on our pages about reverse dieting and spending time away from dieting and how that can help. And I had someone reach out to me today and asked, how long do you typically have someone stay at maintenance, or how long do you typically have someone reverse? And our favorite response ever is it depends because it really does. But like Marissa said, like typically for most people, like let's say you are in a dieting phase for 6 months, well, then we're probably going to not touch another dieting phase for around 6 months or longer. So that's a pretty good rule of thumb, is for however long you've dieted, that's the time you want to spend away from dieting and spend at maintenance. And so you also have to consider that if you're reverse dieting, you're still not out of the deficit, or you're not really at maintenance yet. So taking that into consideration as well as the time it takes you to get back to what your new maintenance is. But like Marissa was saying, it depends. So what are your current goals? Do you want to just maintain at this new level of leanness and you want to add in calories back? You want to be able to feel like you can go out to dinner and go on vacation and not really have to worry about dieting or being strict with food. And then, yeah, like maybe that person stays at maintenance for a little bit longer. Maybe someone's ultimate goal is to lose more weight, but they know that they need to spend time out of a dieting phase because maybe they just plateaued and there was nowhere else for us to go with the dieting phase. So they're spending time in maintenance, getting themselves ready and prepared to diet again. That person may spend a little bit less time at maintenance. So it really, really just depends. And if someone comes out of a dieting phase and they need to build a lot of muscle, it's not gonna, like, you can't really do that in a dieting phase. So they may spend even more time at maintenance or more time reversing, getting their food even higher. So it really, really does depend. But good rule of thumb is however long you dieted, that's how long you should spend out of a dieting phase.
Yeah, and that's generally speaking, but I will say there are special circumstances where maybe you have a lot of weight to lose and maybe you're kind of halfway through it or something, and maybe you spend a month or two at maintenance, even though you've spent the past year dieting, and that's coined a extended diet break. And we're
Yeah.
going to have a very special guest next week, I think, to talk about that I'm not going to spill too much on, but we have a really, really good interview coming up on diet breaks, refeeds, and how to use these intermittent non-dieting strategies in a long-term diet to really be successful. So that'll be fun. But yeah, once you get to a place where you feel good, you got energy, you're eating good calories, your body weight's maintaining, and you can stay there for as long as you like, until your goals change. And then that's it. You're done reverse dieting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing too, it's like, I think it's really good when a person comes to a dieting phase because they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm just sick of eating this amount of food. They're like,
Yeah, it
I
could be a
just
lot.
can't. Yeah, it can. And so I think that might be an episode for another time to talk about like what to do if you don't have an appetite, because that is definitely something that I am dealing with a lot with clients now. And I would love to have an episode that we can reference for them, because I feel like a lot goes into it, and kind of like maybe even like dieting strategies, or like reverse dieting strategies. That could be something that we'll cover for you guys. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of our whole take on reverse dieting. And I mean, and now you guys don't have to listen to a 90-minute episode. You got it in 40. Another record for us.
Yeah, I think we did good.
Yeah, I agree. So anything else that you want to add?
Nope. But great idea on the next episode because we have a lot of those too.
All right, perfect. Well, let's see here. I want to say thank you to Colton for being quiet after his nap, for allowing us to finish this podcast episode. But anyways, guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.